The Light of the Jedi doesn't start the High Republic with a bang, but what it does do is set the foundation for more interesting stories to come in the future. The book can easily be broken down into 3 parts. Part 1 is extremely interesting and fun, Part 2 is extremely sluggish and boring and brings the book down, and Part 3 returns to form by also being extremely entertaining by copying the similar tropes of Part 1. But the book is essentially designed as a stepping stone towards a bigger story, and it does do some unique things that make it extremely entertaining at times, so I would recommend reading it, especially if you're a big fan of the Jedi. Now, there are going to be some spoilers in this review, so if you want to read The Light of the Jedi and experience it firsthand, you have been warned. I think the main question on people's minds is, does the High Republic feel like a different era? And the answer is yes and no. While it does feel more like the prequel era than anything else, there are definitely elements of the High Republic that stand out and make it unique in its own right. But I wouldn't go into this book thinking you're going to be reading about something like the Old Republic or something completely different in general. So, as always, I like to get my criticisms out of the way first, and there are 2 big problems with this book. First up is the Nihil, and they are extremely uninspired, and they're exactly what I thought they were going to be. They're just a bunch of marauders, they're a bunch of savages who do whatever they want for money. And the only thing that makes them unique is the fact that they have a technology that's never been seen before. They have the ability to travel through hyperspace in a way that's kind of similarly described as the TARDIS from Doctor Who. They disappear and they just reappear. But that's just it. The only threat from the antagonists is their technology, not the antagonists themselves. The only interesting character in the Nihil is a character called Marchion Ro, and he's the leader of them, and he controls the technology. And this technology is actually connected to a character in The Force Awakens called Lor San Tekka, or at least connected to his family line. But the problem is, despite Marchion Ro being an interesting character, he's sidelined during the whole book for his underlings, or the Tempest Runners as they're called, and he only becomes the main antagonist at the end of the book, which is to set up the sequel. The next real issue with the book is the entire middle section. I'll call it Part 2, where the entire story comes to a sluggish halt. In my experience, it kind of loses sight of what it's trying to be, and almost loses focus on its own genre at times. Sometimes it wants to be a thriller, sometimes it wants to be an action-adventure, and for me this just doesn't really work. It didn't really help that the story doesn't have an outright protagonist, and so a lot of the middle chapter just seems to shimmy between side characters who are kind of irrelevant, and at the same time they're uninteresting and bland, to the point where I was almost falling asleep reading these chapters. But fortunately, the Jedi chapters usually are included in between these side character chapters, which gives you the incentive to keep reading. But these 2 things are really my main criticisms. The strength of the book is really in its interpretation of the Jedi. Every time the Jedi are on the page, the light of the Jedi shines, and it's such a shame that it seems to deviate so much from them. While the characters themselves are innately uninteresting, it's their perception of the Jedi Order, the Force, and everything that surrounds them that makes every interaction fun to read. Every different Jedi that you come across in this book perceives the Force in a different way, and it really expands on your own perception of the Force. Additionally, there is a nice connection between 2 of the Jedi in this book who actually share a Force bond, and that is Avar Kriss, who is supposed to be the protagonist, but isn't, and her childhood friend and Jedi companion Elzar, who is kind of shunned by the Order for trying to figure out the mysteries of the Force in a way that they don't necessarily like. The connection between these 2 characters is very similar to Revan and Bastila, and every time they're on the page together, the book really delves into the light side and the Force, and it's always interesting. For example, Avar Kriss, who is very similar to Bastila, she even uses battle meditation in the book. It's not called the same thing, but it does the exact same job. She perceives the Force as a symphony or a song. Everything in the Force to her is like music, and every time she focuses on it, she can feel and she can see and hear it in a way. And that was a really interesting thing to read as she was experiencing it firsthand in the book. And the same goes for many other characters. Some, for example, perceive the Force as the ocean, some perceive it as space itself, and there's just so many different perceptions of the Force that make this a really interesting dive into the general Jedi perspective. And yes, while I said the characters aren't particularly interesting innately, apart from maybe Avar, Elzar, and the Wookiee Jedi Baraga, every Jedi character has a really unique take on the world around them, and what they lose in general character interest, personality-wise, they gain in world perspective, I guess, or world perception. The beginning of the book and the end of the book are also where this story really has impact. The beginning starts with a major galactic tragedy where a planet is on the verge of destruction, and it really treats the Jedi as the mystical space wizards that are all heroic and powerful and the only ones that can save the day. Actually, that's a wrong way to say it, because it doesn't just treat the Jedi in that way, it showcases them in that way too. We witness powers that we haven't seen before, we see the Order come together to do something that's miraculous on a grand scale, and the first 100 pages do an incredible job of ping-ponging between individual characters who are experiencing this tragedy from a different perspective, whether it be the heroic Jedi perspective, the powerless but heroic everyday man, or the people that are just thinking they're going to die. This quick pacing keeps you hooked during every page, and you don't want to put it down, and the same goes for the final part of the book too. Now, do I recommend giving this book a read or a purchase? And my answer is yes, especially if you like the Jedi and everything around the light side of the Force. While the story itself is a stepping stone towards a bigger and grander story arc, I think this fundamentally gives you an idea of what the High Republic is going to be about, and I think you can make your impression of this era through this one story alone, and I think you should do that. I personally enjoyed it despite the sluggish middle section, and I'm excited to see where they go with the High Republic. There's a lot of potential, it just depends on how creative they want to be. I don't want this review to be extremely long, so I am going to leave it there. These are essentially the fundamental things to the book that I think are important, and I do think the best way to gauge your own opinion of the High Republic is to give this book a read yourself. There are some elements that may harken back to the Old Republic, such as grand scale technology, certain visual designs, which, just a quick addition, the visual designs of this book are extremely integral. The book is always talking about how beautiful everything is and how wondrous everything is, so I think the High Republic would have actually been more attuned to a visual medium such as a show or a movie, but alas. Tell me in the comments below what you think of the High Republic in general. Are you looking forward to it? And also, perhaps consider subscribing to see all of my future content pertaining to the High Republic and what it means for the wider Star Wars universe. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Come and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel further, and please come and join my Discord server. I would love to have you there. All links are in the description below. I'll see you guys in the next video. But until then, may the Force be with you. Always.